In the year 2000, the United States did something almost no country manages to do against a disease this contagious. It won. Federal health officials stood in front of cameras and declared measles eliminated on American soil. Not controlled, not rare, eliminated. Meaning the virus no longer had a foothold, no longer moved person to person on its own inside this country's borders. It took 40 years, 3 generations of researchers, and a vaccine campaign that reached into nearly every school, church basement, and pediatrician's office in America to get there. 25 years later, in a stretch of rural West Texas, a school-aged child died of measles, the first person to die of this disease on American soil since 2015. Here is the part that does not fit the story you have probably heard. The outbreak that killed that child did not happen because the science failed, or because the vaccine stopped working, or because the virus changed. It happened in a country that still, on paper, has one of the most advanced vaccine infrastructures on Earth. And at the exact moment the outbreak was spreading, the federal agencies responsible for warning the public about measles were also doing something else. They were taking that infrastructure apart. This is a story about a wall that took 40 years to build, a threshold that only needed a few points of erosion to fail, and the people who were standing at the control panel when the alarm and the demolition turned out to share the same source.
Stick with me. This gets stranger the closer you look.
To understand what was dismantled, you have to understand what was actually built, because this was not a story of a scientist stumbling onto a cure. It was closer to a 40-year infrastructure project carried out by thousands of people, most of whom nobody remembers by name. It starts in 1954. A researcher named John Enders, working out of Boston, isolated the measles virus itself from the blood of a sick 13-year-old named David Edmonston. That sample, the Edmonston strain, became the raw material for everything that followed. Enders and his team spent years weakening the live virus in the lab, generation after generation, trying to find the version that would teach the immune system to fight measles without making a child sick with the real disease. By 1963, the first licensed measles vaccines reached the public. They worked, but they were rough, enough side effects that uptake stayed limited. In 1968, a vaccine scientist named Morris Hilleman refined the strain into a gentler, more attenuated version, the one that would become the backbone of the modern vaccine. By 1971, that measles vaccine had been combined with vaccines for mumps and rubella into a single shot, the MMR, cutting the number of needles a child needed and simplifying a schedule that pediatricians and parents actually had a chance of following. None of this happened by accident, and none of it happened fast. It took clinical trials, manufacturing scale-up, a public health delivery system built county by county, and a sustained campaign to get shots into the arms of children whose parents had never seen measles kill anyone, because by the time those parents were raising kids, the vaccine had already made that kind of death rare. That work reached its finish line in 2000, when the United States declared measles eliminated. It is worth sitting with what that word actually means. Elimination does not mean measles could never enter the country again. Travelers would still occasionally bring it in from places where the virus remained endemic. It means the chain of transmission inside U.S. borders had been broken. A case might land, but it would not spread on its own, because the wall of immunity around it was too high for the virus to climb. There is a second layer to that distinction, and it matters for everything that follows. Elimination is not the same as the virus ceasing to exist. Measles never left the world. It kept circulating, kept killing, in countries that had not built the wall or could not afford to. Elimination is a condition, not a conquest. It describes a state of maintenance, a wall that holds only for as long as it is kept at height. The virus outside the borders never stopped testing it. Every traveler who carried it in was, in effect, a pressure test, and for a quarter century, the wall passed every test. Nothing about that arrangement was permanent. It was permanent looking, which is a different thing entirely, and the difference between those two is where this story lives. The disease was declared gone. The work of keeping it gone never was. That wall was not a metaphor. It was a number, and the number was almost unforgiving.
Here is why a few points of decline in vaccination coverage is not a rounding error. It is closer to a trap door. Measles is, by a wide margin, one of the most contagious pathogens known to medicine. Its basic reproduction number, the average number of people one infected person will pass the virus to in a population with no immunity, sits somewhere between 12 and 18. For comparison, a typical seasonal flu strain sits closer to 1 or 2. Measles does not need close contact to spread. It is airborne, and the virus can linger suspended in a room for up to 2 hours after the infected person has already left it. A child can walk into an empty pediatrician's waiting room, sit down, and catch measles from someone who was never in the room with them at all. That contagiousness gives measles a second property, one that epidemiologists talk about almost with grim respect. Measles finds gaps. Because it spreads so efficiently, it functions as a kind of audit of a population's immunity. Wherever protection has thinned, whether anyone knows it has thinned or not, measles will locate the weakness and announce it. Other diseases can circulate quietly through a partially protected population for years without revealing much. Measles cannot. It moves too fast and burns too visibly to be ignored. When it returns as a verdict. An outbreak of measles doubles as a measurement, taken by the virus itself, of exactly how much of the wall is still standing. Which is why the number that matters most in this entire story is not a case count. It is a percentage. This is the number the entire outbreak turns on. So let me slow down for a second. Herd immunity against measles does not kick in at 90% or even 93%. The generally accepted threshold is around 95% of a population fully vaccinated. Below that line, the virus finds enough unprotected people to keep a chain of infection alive. Above it, outbreaks tend to burn out on their own before they can spread far. That 5% margin is not a policy preference. It is a property of the pathogen itself, calculated from how contagious it is. And it barely moves no matter who is in office. Keep that 95% number in your head. Everything after this comes back to it.
Before a vaccine existed, this math played out every year in the United States at a brutal scale. In the pre-vaccine era, measles infected an estimated 3 to 4 million Americans annually. Roughly 48,000 of them were hospitalized every year. Between 400 and 500 died every year, not in a single bad outbreak as a baseline. The vaccine did not just reduce those numbers, it collapsed them to nearly zero for decades because the country stayed above that 95% line. The moment a population drops below it, the arithmetic simply reverses. It helps to think of that threshold the way you would think of any other piece of infrastructure. A bridge is rated for a certain load. A levee is built to a certain height. Nobody celebrates the levee on the days the water stays low, and nobody thinks about herd immunity in the years when nothing spreads. That is the nature of protective infrastructure. When it works, it is invisible, and its invisibility is precisely what makes it easy to neglect. Herd immunity carries one more property a levy does not. It protects people who cannot protect themselves, the ones for whom the vaccine is not an option, by surrounding them with people for whom it is. Every vaccinated person is, in a small way, part of someone else's wall. And a wall built out of millions of individual decisions can be unbuilt the same way. And starting well before 2025, the United States had already begun sliding under that threshold. This is the part of the story that does not follow the shape people expect. It is easy to imagine outbreaks like this one as something that simply happens, a gap that opens on its own through apathy or misinformation drifting through communities with no one steering it. That is not quite what the data shows. There is a reason erosion is the right word and collapse is not. A wall of immunity rarely fails all at once on a date anyone can point to. It fails the way a coastline does. A little each season, no single loss dramatic enough to force a response. Every measurement slightly worse than the last, and slightly easier to accept because the last one was accepted too. Nothing about any individual year of decline announced itself as a decision. That is what makes this kind of failure so difficult to assign and so easy to permit. A dramatic breach would have produced a dramatic reaction. A slow one produced what slow ones always produce, which is nothing until the consequences stopped being gradual. The decline in coverage was already underway before any single policy decision made it worse. National MMR vaccination coverage among kindergartners had been sliding below the 95% line every year since the 2019 to 2020 school year, when it stood at 95.2%. By the 2025-2026 school year, CDC's own SchoolVaxView data put kindergarten MMR coverage at 92.4%, a small decline from the year before, but a decline in the wrong direction for the sixth year running. Alongside it, the number of kindergartners exempted from one or more required vaccines hit a record 4.2%, up from 3.6% the prior year. Put in raw numbers. Roughly 280,000 kindergartners started the 2025-2026 school year without documentation that they had completed the MMR series at all. And here is what a national percentage cannot tell you. A country does not have one vaccination rate. It has thousands of them, one for every county, every school district, every congregation, every neighborhood. And the national figure is only the average of all of that variation. The virus never meets the average. It meets a specific classroom, a specific waiting room, a specific church basement, and what matters in that room is the coverage in that room. A national number, a few points under the threshold, almost guarantees the existence of communities sitting far, far below it, invisible inside the average, fully exposed. Outbreaks do not begin at the national rate. They begin at the low points, in the pockets where the wall was never as tall as the country's paperwork implied, which is exactly where this one began. That erosion was happening quietly, year over year, well below the headline threshold, until January 5th, 2026, when it stopped being quiet.
I want to be precise about what happened here, because this is the hinge the entire second half of this story turns on. On January 5th, 2026, the Department of Health and Human Services and the CDC formally cut the federally recommended childhood immunization schedule from 17 diseases down to 11. Vaccines for illnesses like influenza, rotavirus, hepatitis A and B, and meningococcal disease were moved out of the routine, universally recommended category and into a category called shared clinical decision-making, meaning the system stopped proactively recommending them to every family and instead left the initiating conversation to individual parents and their doctors. Measles, mumps and rubella stayed on the routine list. But 4 months later, on May 29, 2026, Executive Order 14407 went further, formally committing the federal government to a recommendation that the combined MMR shot itself be broken apart into 3 separate single-disease injections once such products exist, spaced across separate medical visits rather than delivered together. In August, the administration moved to put muscle behind that recommendation. No single antigen measles, mumps, or rubella vaccines are currently licensed for use in the United States. None exist on pharmacy shelves today.
Sit with the shape of that sequence for a second. The agencies whose entire mandate is defending the public against exactly this kind of outbreak spent early 2026 narrowing the list of diseases they actively urged parents to vaccinate against, and moved to unwind the very delivery mechanism, the combined MMR shot, that had made high coverage achievable in the first place back in 1971.
If a story like this is worth your time, the subscribe button's right there. I'd love to have you back for the next one.
The reasoning offered publicly leaned on comparisons to a handful of peer nations with different vaccine schedules, and revived a single antigen approach that had been proposed decades earlier and never adopted in the United States because of long-standing concerns that it would depress uptake, not improve it. Public health organizations, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, warned at the time that spreading required shots across more office visits would not make vaccination safer. It would make it logistically harder at the exact moment coverage needed to go up, not down. It is worth being concrete about why logistics matter this much, because logistics is not a glamorous word, and it is doing enormous work in this story. National vaccination coverage is not produced by policy documents. It is produced by millions of individual appointments that actually happen. The car that starts, the shift that gets covered, the child who gets picked up from school early, the follow-up visit that does not fall through the cracks. Every additional required visit is another point where an intention can quietly become an omission, not through refusal, just through friction. The combined shot of 1971 was a medical achievement, but it was also a logistics achievement. It collapsed several errands into one, and in doing so, it removed most of the places where a family could fall out of the schedule without ever deciding to. Splitting it apart puts every one of those failure points back. None of this required new evidence that the existing MMR schedule was unsafe. It required a comparison to other countries' policy choices and a decision to act on it. Notice what that inversion means. For as long as the wall stood, the burden of proof sat where it belongs, on whoever proposes to change a system that is demonstrably working. Here, the burden quietly switched sides. The schedule that had done the protecting was suddenly the thing required to justify itself, while the change was never asked to demonstrate that it would protect anyone better. Success itself made the inversion possible. Elimination meant that generations of officials, doctors, and parents had never watched this disease move through a community, so the defense they were asked to preserve guarded against something none of them had ever seen. The cost of maintaining the schedule, the reminders, the requirements, the paperwork was concrete and present. The cost of loosening it was theoretical and remote. When an argument is framed that way, the concrete cost tends to win. This is the counterintuitive core of the story. The public-facing arm of the same apparatus was, in this same window, publishing measles case counts, warning about falling coverage, and urging vaccination, while the policy-setting arm, one floor over, was making that coverage harder to sustain. The alarm and the demolition were coming from the same building. Hold on to how disorienting that is from the outside. A parent trying to do the right thing in 2026 was receiving 2 signals from the same source at the same time. This disease is spreading, and the urgency around preventing it is being dialed down. When the institution sounding the alarm is also loosening the defense, the public does not get clarity from either message. It gets permission to believe whichever one is easier. And in a country already drifting below the threshold, the easier message wins by default. That is not a messaging failure that better wording could fix. It is structural.
Now go back to where this story started, because the timeline does not run in the order you would expect. West Texas came first. In late January 2025, a full year before the schedule cut, more than a year before the executive order, measles appeared in a rural community in West Texas with unusually low vaccination coverage. It spread fast, the way it does whenever it finds a population sitting below that 95% line. By February, a school-age child was dead, the first American to die of measles since 2015. The outbreak did not stay contained to Texas. It crossed into New Mexico. By the time health officials declared it over, on August 18, 2025, the final toll stood at 99 hospitalizations and 3 deaths. 2 children in Texas, 1 adult across the New Mexico line.
You would expect a death toll like that in a country that had eliminated the disease 25 years earlier to function as a circuit breaker. A moment sharp enough to reverse the coverage decline, tighten the schedule, close the exemption loopholes. Instead, 2025 closed with 2,289 confirmed measles cases nationwide, the highest annual total the country had recorded since before elimination in 2000. And 2026 did not slow down. It accelerated. By August 13, 2026, the CDC had confirmed 2,566 measles cases for the year, already past the entire total for 2025, with months of the year still remaining. It is the largest measles outbreak the United States has recorded in more than 3 decades, spread across dozens of active clusters in nearly every state, and it is still climbing. And understand what climbing back would actually require, because the 2 directions are not mirror images of each other. Coverage falls passively. It rises only on purpose. Every point of protection this country lost can be recovered only the way it was won the first time, family by family, clinic by clinic, through persuasion that has to be earned and trust that has to be rebuilt where it was spent. The original campaign had one advantage no recovery effort will have again. It was vaccinating a public that remembered the disease, that had sat beside the hospital beds and attended the funerals, and needed no convincing that the threat was real. The rebuild has to work on a public that was told, correctly, for 25 years, that the problem was solved and is now being asked to reverse course by institutions whose own conduct is part of the story. Meanwhile, the virus operates on its own schedule. It does not pause while coverage recovers. Every season spent below the threshold is a season it gets to use. A wall can be weakened at the speed of a signature. It can only be rebuilt at the speed of belief. None of those are abstractions once you set them next to 2,566 confirmed cases and a body count that starts with a child in West Texas. Because that is the thing about the numbers in a story like this. Every one of them decomposes into people. A hospitalization count is a set of parents sitting in hallways. A case count is classrooms of children running fevers their grandparents would have recognized and their parents never had to. And a coverage percentage, that dry, bureaucratic figure, is the most human number of all, because it is nothing more than the sum of what millions of families were told, what they believed, and what they were able to get done. The statistics did not fail those families. The statistics described with complete accuracy and in real time exactly what was coming. The failure sits somewhere else. So here is the answer to the question the cold open left standing. Why was a disease America had already beaten allowed to come back in a country with the infrastructure to stop it? Not because anyone lacked the tools. The vaccine still works exactly as well as it did in 1971. Not because the public was never warned. The same health agencies that made the outbreak numbers public were the ones raising the alarm about them in real time, month after month, all year. It happened because the apparatus responsible for maintaining the wall spent the same window narrowing what it recommended and moving to break apart the delivery method that had kept the wall standing for 50 years. And did so while the outbreak they were supposedly guarding against was already killing people, The people warning you about measles and the people dismantling the defense against it were never two different groups. They were sitting in the same building reading the same case counts at the same time. And that is the asymmetry this whole story rests on. Building the wall required 40 years of coordinated effort by people who mostly never saw the finished result. Weakening it required no comparable effort at all. Nobody had to disprove the science or defeat the vaccine or beat the researchers at their own work. It was enough to recommend a little less, require a little less, make the path a little longer, and then let ordinary human friction do the rest. A demolition does not have to look like one. Sometimes it looks like nothing at all, just the maintenance quietly ending. It is being taken apart in real time, one recommendation at a time, and the bill for that is not abstract. It has a name, an age, and a county in West Texas.
That's the story. If you want the sourcing behind every number in this one, it's linked below. And I'll see you in the next episode. I'm your host. This is Papa Delta Storytelling.